Gabriella Jenkins, a symbol of justice, a woman who inspired millions to believe in the power of truth and courage, now stood frozen in her office. In her hand was a simple envelope, but its contents were enough to upend the very world she had painstakingly built. Inside was a photograph of Ava, her daughter, her smile barely illuminated in dim light, seeming more like a plea for help than a gesture of joy. Below the photo, a crude, chilling scrawl cut into her mind like a blade. "If you want to protect your family, stop now." The thunderous applause from the global conference still echoed faintly in her memory, but now it was replaced by a suffocating silence. Gabriella sank into her chair, her heart pounding violently in her chest. She understood this wasn't merely a threat, it was a declaration of war. And this time, the stakes weren't just her reputation, but the safety of the person she held dearest in the world. The grand auditorium was a masterpiece of elegance, its towering ceilings adorned with dazzling crystal chandeliers that bathed the space in a golden glow. Velvet red curtains, drawn aside to reveal the stage, shimmered softly in the light, an exquisite blend of modernity and classic grandeur. Massive LED screens behind the stage displayed images of global justice campaigns interwoven with Gabriella's radiant smile, a beacon of resilience and hope. Rows upon rows of meticulously aligned seats were filled with attendees from every corner of the globe. The room buzzed with murmured conversations, sporadically interrupted by bursts of applause as Gabriella Jenkins' name was announced over the speakers. The audience had not merely gathered to witness a speech they had come to see. In the flesh, the woman who had turned pain into power, shaking the foundations of an unjust system. Backstage, Gabriella drew in a deep breath. She wore a pristine white dress, tailored to perfection, exuding both authority and grace. The stage lights brushed against her features, illuminating a face that carried equal measures of confidence and emotion. A voice rang out from the speakers. "Please welcome to the stage a truly extraordinary woman, a global symbol of justice and human rights, Gabriella Jenkins." The stage doors parted. Gabriella stepped forward to the sound of thunderous applause that rolled across the hall like a wave. The audience rose as one, their faces turned toward her with reverence. The spotlight followed her, accentuating each deliberate, graceful step as she approached the wooden podium. For a fleeting moment, the room seemed to hold its breath, suspended in collective anticipation, before erupting into cheers and applause once more. Tears glistened in some eyes, others hastily dabbed at their faces, overcome by emotion. Gabriella paused before the microphone, her gaze sweeping across the hall with a serene, yet resolute smile. Pride swelled within her, not a personal vanity, but a profound gratitude for everyone who had stood their ground in the face of adversity. This was their triumph as much as hers, and now they looked to her to keep the flame of hope burning. Gabriella stood before the microphone, the stage lights cascading over her, illuminating her sharp yet warm eyes. The room was steeped in silence, every person holding their breath in anticipation. She took a deep breath, her gaze sweeping across the rows of seats, as if trying to connect with each individual in the audience. Gabriella, her voice steady, brimming with emotion. "1 year ago, I was just another woman in the crowd, feeling invisible in a world riddled with injustice. I used to believe that if I stayed silent, if I endured, things would eventually get better. But I was wrong." She paused, her eyes momentarily tinged with bitterness before they reignited with resolve. That incident at Lax was not just an insult, it was a wake-up call. It reminded me that we cannot expect justice from a system built on the foundations of injustice. I stood up, not just for myself, but for others, for those whose voices have been silenced, for those who never had the chance to defend themselves. A lone clap rang out from somewhere in the crowd, followed by a ripple of applause. Gabriella raised her hand gently, signaling them to hold. Gabriella, her voice growing stronger. "But journey isn't just about pain or anger. This is a journey of hope. I did not walk this path alone. Over the past year, I've witnessed the power of unity. I've seen people of every color, every background stand together and say, "Enough." She looked deeply into the crowd, her voice softening but resonating with heartfelt sincerity. "I've seen your power. The petitions you signed, the protests you joined, the demands you made for accountability. You've shown me and the world that when we stand together, there is nothing we cannot achieve." A loud voice from the crowd called out, "That's right." Gabriella smiled faintly, but her tone sharpened, cutting through the air like a blade. "The journey isn't over. We still face towering challenges, systems that strangle justice, forces that wield power to divide us. But as I stand here today, I am no longer afraid, and I hope neither are you." She lifted her hand, an open invitation. Imagine a world where no one is judged by the color of their skin, their gender, or where they come from. A world where every individual is treated with the dignity they deserve. This is not just a dream. It is a reality we can forge if we act, if we fight together. This time, the applause roared like thunder, echoing throughout the hall, a relentless wave of support and affirmation. Gabriella bowed her head in gratitude, her eyes shining with unshakable conviction. Gabriella closing, her voice imbued with strength. "Remember this, injustice survives only when we allow it to. We are the change. And today, together, we are writing a new chapter in history, a chapter of justice, hope." She stepped back from the microphone, the applause and shouts from the crowd swelling, surging like a tide that refused to recede. Gabriella descended the stage steps, the soft click of her heels on the plush red carpet echoing with a quiet authority. Behind her, the stage lights began to dim, giving way to the gentle white glow of the auditorium. The applause still rolled through the hall like a symphony, interwoven with cheers that carried from the farthest corners of the room. Hundreds of eyes remained fixed on her, filled with admiration. Gabriella held a smile on her lips, one she knew wasn't just for herself but for everyone she had fought to protect. As she reached the end of the corridor, Michael stood waiting, his eyes reflecting a mix of pride and emotion. He took her hand, a small gesture but one that radiated unwavering support. Michael, his voice warm. "You were incredible, Gabby. You don't just inspire people, you're changing the world." Gabriella squeezed his hand gently, about to respond, when a movement from the crowd caught her attention. A man in a long black coat, his hat pulled low to obscure his face, emerged from the back row. He said nothing as he approached Gabriella, his movements deliberate and unnervingly calm. Stopping just a step away, the man extended a thin, weathered hand holding a pale brown envelope. Stranger, his voice hoarse, a whisper. "For you, it's important." Gabriella hesitated, surprise flickering in her eyes, but curiosity compelled her to take the envelope. When she looked up to question him, the man had already turned, disappearing into the crowd like a shadow swallowed by the night. The cheers and laughter of the audience faded to a dull hum in Gabriella's ears. The atmosphere seemed to shift, growing heavier, more foreboding. Her palms grew damp as she slowly opened the envelope, while Michael, still smiling beside her, remained oblivious to the sudden tension in her demeanor. Inside was a photograph. Gabriella stared at it, her entire body freezing. It was Ava, her daughter, playing in the schoolyard. The girl's face beamed with joy, but it did little to quell the storm rising in Gabriella's chest. This wasn't a simple message. Beneath the photo, scrawled in ominous red ink that looked like dripping blood, were the words, "If you want to protect your family, stop now." The photo trembled in her hands as fear surged through her like a tidal wave. She bit her lip hard, her eyes shifting from shock to a simmering fury. Yet she forced herself to steady her breathing, her fingers curling tightly around the edge of the envelope to hide its contents. Michael, noticing the subtle shift in her expression, furrowed his brow in concern. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his gaze searching hers. "Michael." "Gabby, what's wrong? Are you okay?" Gabriella swallowed the lump in her throat and managed a faint smile, her voice dropping to a calm but firm tone. "Gabriella,
I'm fine, just something unexpected. We'll talk later, okay?"
Michael hesitated, his concern evident, but Gabriella's unwavering gaze assured him she could handle it. Reluctantly, he nodded, though unease lingered in his eyes. Gabriella turned away, slipping the envelope into her bag, her grip tightening, as if trying to crush the dread it contained. The lively sounds of the audience now felt distant and hollow, as though she had stepped into another realm, a colder, more perilous one. She quickened her pace, her heels gliding across the polished marble floor of the backstage corridor. The warm yellow lights along the hall seemed to lose their glow, casting elongated, eerie shadows on the walls. Reaching a secluded corner where the light couldn't reach, she leaned against the wall, struggling to catch her breath. Pulling the envelope out again, she stared at the photo of Ava. The red words beneath it burned into her mind, each letter pressing down on her like a weight she couldn't shake. In that moment, emotions surged: fear, anxiety, anger, but somewhere deep within, a flame of resolve ignited, steady and unyielding. Gabriella knew she couldn't back down. Whoever these people were, whatever they wanted, their goal was clear: silence her, make her retreat. But she understood all too well giving in would only embolden them. She pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she dialed a number. It rang once before a familiar voice answered. Gabriella, her voice low, steady.
"Clara, I need to see you. It's about Ava."
Ending the call, she clenched her fist tightly, her eyes burning with determination. This was no longer just a fight for justice. It was a battle for her family, and nothing would make her back down. From the auditorium, the cheers and applause continued to echo, a celebration that now felt worlds away. Gabriella stood in the shadows, preparing herself for the storm ahead. Her enemies had made a grave mistake. They didn't realize that once Gabriella Jenkins began to fight, she never stopped. Gabriella and Michael left the bustling auditorium, its echoes of laughter and applause fading behind them, seeking refuge in a quiet corridor at the back. Here, the soft, dim light from wall sconces glimmered on the polished stone floor, casting shimmering trails that seemed to mirror the tension in the air. The silence was heavy, as though it bore the weight of all the fears they had concealed from the crowd. Michael stopped by a large glass wall, the city lights outside spilling across his face, highlighting the worry etched into his features. Gabriella, her steps measured but resolute, approached him, her hand still clutching the envelope that held the ominous photograph. Michael breaking the silence, his voice low and grave.
"Gabby, you need to be more careful. This isn't just about you anymore. We can't gamble with Ava's safety."
He turned to face her, his sharp gaze brimming with both fear and frustration. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, as though trying to hold on to something slipping through his grasp. Gabriella took a deep breath before stepping closer. The glow from the glass wall illuminated her face, revealing exhaustion tempered by steely resolve. Gabriella soft but firm.
"Michael, do you think I don't care about Ava? She's everything to me. But if I back down, if I stay silent, I'm not just betraying myself, I'm betraying her."
Michael, his voice rising, raw and uncontrolled.
"I don't care about them, Gabby. But Ava is a child. She can't protect herself. We're putting her in danger, don't you see that?"
He stepped closer, almost face to face with her, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. His hands gripped her shoulders, as if trying to pull her back from the edge of a perilous cliff only he could see. Gabriella bowed her head slightly, letting the weight of his words settle. She understood his fear because she felt it too. But when she lifted her gaze again, her eyes blazed with determination. Gabriella speaking slowly, emphasizing each word.
"They want us to be afraid, Michael. That's their goal. They think that threats alone will make me stop. But do you know what's scarier? Letting Ava grow up in a world where people like them always win."
She placed a hand over Michael's chest, feeling the rapid, uncertain beat of his heart beneath her palm. She locked eyes with him, her gaze piercing through the barriers of his fear, searching for the trust they had always shared. Michael, his voice cracking, trying to push back.
Gabby, I can't handle it if something happens to you, and I couldn't live with myself if we lost Ava because of this.
Michael dropped his head into his hands, his broad shoulders sagging under an invisible weight he had rarely felt in his life. Helplessness. Gabriella watched him, her heart aching, but she refused to let herself waver. She knelt before him, gently taking his hands in hers, forcing him to look at her. Gabriella, her voice tender but resolute.
Michael, I'm not doing this alone. I have you, I have Clara, and I have everyone who believes in us. But I can't, and I won't turn back. If I give up now, it's not just Ava. Thousands of children like her will grow up in fear.
Michael stared into her eyes, the raw intensity of her conviction cutting through his resistance. His voice softened, worn by emotion. Michael.
You're so brave, Gabby. Sometimes I wish you didn't have to carry it all.
Gabriella smiled faintly, squeezing his hands tighter. Gabriella.
I'm not carrying it alone. We're in this together, remember? You promised to stand by me, and I believe in that promise.
Michael searched her eyes, seeing the unwavering strength within them, a strength he couldn't deny, no matter how much he wished to shield her. He sighed deeply, his shoulders relaxing as he reached to pull her to her feet and into his arms. Michael whispering into her ear.
I don't want to lose you, but if you're fighting and I'll fight with you, we'll protect Ava. We'll protect everything.
Gabriella resting her head on his shoulder, her voice firm.
Thank you, Michael. With you by my side, I know we can't lose.
They held each other tightly, their hands clasped in a shared resolve. The city lights beyond the glass wall cast a soft glow over Gabriella's face, illuminating the fierce determination in her eyes. In the distance, the muffled noise of the auditorium carried on, but here in the quiet, they stood together, readying themselves for the battle ahead, not just to protect their family, but to defend the hope they had sown in the world. Gabriella straightened her posture, pulling Ava's photograph from her pocket once more. Under the dim hallway light, her daughter's radiant face seemed to glow, a small beacon of light piercing the darkness that loomed around her. Gabriella stared at the photo, her heart clenching briefly. But the pain was swiftly overtaken by a surge of unyielding determination. She allowed a faint smile to cross her lips, not one of joy, but a sharp expression of resolve that nothing could break. Gabriella whispering to herself, her voice low but brimming with power.
They picked the wrong person to threaten.
Michael stood beside her, silently watching. He didn't speak, but the turmoil in his eyes was unmistakable. He knew Gabriella knew her strength, her unrelenting will. Once she made up her mind, nothing could deter her. Yet the weight of worry pressed down on him like an immovable stone, heavy and relentless. Michael, his voice hoarse, a final plea to hold her back.
Gabby, are you sure? What lies ahead isn't just dangerous. It's beyond anything we can control.
Gabriella folded the photograph carefully and slid it back into her pocket. Turning to face Michael, her gaze was tender but blazing with fire. Gabriella nodding softly, her voice firm.
I've never been more certain. Sometimes it's the things we can't control that demand we confront them.
Michael didn't reply. He exhaled deeply, squeezing her hand once more. He knew he couldn't stop her. And deep down, he also knew she was right, though the path ahead was shrouded in shadow. Gabriella adjusted her coat, the gesture deliberate, like a warrior preparing for battle. She turned toward the exit, where faint light from the auditorium still filtered through the doors, though it no longer seemed strong enough to illuminate the path she was about to take. With each step toward the door, the sharp click of her heels echoed against the cold stone floor. Michael remained where he was, his eyes following her retreating figure. The hallway's encroaching darkness seemed to stretch out, reaching for her as if to foreshadow the trials waiting ahead. Gabriella stepped out of the conference building, her gaze burning with the fire of defiance, undeterred by the shadows gathering in her wake. At the end of the driveway, a sleek black car idled, its headlights slicing through the night. The door lowered slowly, and a voice emerged from within, distant but laced with menace.
The world you know just changed, Gabriella Jenkins. Are you ready for it?
The scene froze with Gabriella standing still, her shoulders squared, her eyes steady and unflinching as they locked onto the car. Not a flicker of hesitation crossed her face. A cold wind swept through the corridor behind her, but it couldn't extinguish the fire raging in her eyes. Gabriella's office, usually a pristine and orderly space with its sleek modern design and soft ambient lighting, was now steeped in a tension so thick it felt suffocating, like a taut string ready to snap. The large curtains flanking the floor-to-ceiling windows remained open, allowing the harsh afternoon sunlight to pour in, further illuminating the chaos unraveling within. Her oak desk, typically a symbol of authority and control, was in disarray. Files lay scattered across its surface, some spilling onto the polished floor. The computer screen behind it flashed with a flood of unread email notifications. The air was alive with an onslaught of sounds, the relentless ringing of phones from every corner of the office, a shrill, unyielding backdrop. The furious clatter of keyboards as her staff typed frantically, as if racing against time itself. Urgent, whispered exchanges punctuated by louder, more anxious voices rising sporadically from different desks.
This article is blowing up on social media. Thousands of comments already. We need a response now before this spirals further out of control.
In the far corner, a television screen broadcasted a live news report. Gabriella's face dominated the screen, accompanied by a bold headline.
Gabriella Jenkins accused of embezzling charity funds. Is the hero really a villain?
Heavy sighs broke through the din as several staff members tried to suppress their growing panic. Gabriella stood in the center of the room, her gaze sweeping over the scene before her. The crisp white suit she wore, a symbol of her usual confidence and professionalism, now seemed stark against the clenched fists at her sides, a silent manifestation of the immense pressure bearing down on her. Yet her face betrayed no fear. While exhaustion flickered briefly in her eyes, her expression remained resolute. Gabriella took a deep breath, as if inhaling the tension around her, and stepped forward. Nearby employees instinctively looked up as she moved closer, their eyes wide with anxiety, searching for guidance. A young staffer, her hair hastily tied back, approached with a stack of printed papers in hand. Her voice wavered as she spoke. Young staffer.
We need a statement immediately, Ms. Jenkins. This story is spreading too fast, and we're being overwhelmed.
Gabriella didn't reply right away. She took the papers, her eyes scanning the pages filled with damning accusations. Each line felt like a blow meant to shatter her resolve, but she refused to let it show. For a brief moment, the cacophony of the room seemed to dim. Every eye turned to Gabriella, waiting, the weight of expectation hanging heavy in the air. She stood tall, her gaze sweeping across her team, her presence commanding their attention. Gabriella, her voice low but clear, steady.
Listen to me, all of you. This isn't the first challenge we've faced, and it certainly won't be the last. I know you're scared. I won't pretend I'm not feeling it too. But remember this, the truth is on our side. We will not let lies and sensationalism destroy everything we've worked for.
The frantic typing slowed. A few employees nodded subtly, their faces softening with a glimmer of hope sparked by her unwavering tone. The phone still rang, but their shrill sound now seemed less chaotic, more like a call to action. Gabriella glanced up at the television screen, which replayed a clip accusing her of misdeeds. Her jaw tightened, her eyes flashing with a fierce determination. She turned back to her desk, placed the documents down, and locked eyes with her trusted assistant. Gabriella firmly.
Prepare a press conference. We don't back down.
For a heartbeat, the room seemed to hold its breath. Then, as if galvanized by her words, the energy shifted. The fear and disorder gave way to focused preparation. Phones were answered with a newfound resolve. Conversations grew sharper, more purposeful. The office was no longer a chaotic battleground, it was a war room. And Gabriella Jenkins stood at its heart, ready to lead her team into a fight not just for her reputation, but for the truth itself. Gabriella's office was bathed in the cold, stark glow of the large wall-mounted screen. All other sounds in the room seemed to fade beneath the dominating voice of the news anchor. The broadcast headline, bold and sensational, blared across the screen.
Hero of fraud? Gabriella Jenkins accused of embezzling charity funds.
The footage cut between clips Gabriella smiling warmly at a charity event, juxtaposed with an image of financial spreadsheets slashed with ominous red lines, creating a visual insinuation of wrongdoing. The anchor's voice was sharp, deliberate, dripping with accusation.
According to anonymous sources, several expenditures by the Resilience Foundation lack transparency. Leaked documents suggest hundreds of thousands of dollars were misused for personal luxuries, including extravagant trips and high-end shopping.
The broadcast shifted to a clip of Gabriella exiting a high-end boutique, a shopping bag in hand. The footage, innocent in reality, was manipulated to appear incriminating, overlaid with vague financial figures flashing across the screen. The air in the office was suffocating. Staff members clustered around the screen, their faces pale, mouths covered in shock. Whispers spread like wildfire, a current of fear and doubt running through the room.
Where did they get those images? She couldn't have done this, could she?
Gabriella sat at her desk, her hands resting on the polished surface. Her shoulders, though squared, betrayed a slight tension. Her eyes remained fixed on the screen, unblinking. The outward calm she projected was a mask, concealing the storm of anger and disappointment boiling within her. Her thoughts raced. Who was behind this? How could they twist the truth so cruelly? Would the people she'd devoted her life to helping believe these lies? She felt the weight of Ava's photo in her pocket, heavier than ever. The threat wasn't just against her career, it was a direct attack on everything she held dear. Yet Gabriella knew this was no time to let emotions rule her. A voice broke through the tension.
Ms. Jenkins, what do we do now? Where's the official statement? If we don't respond fast, the media will tear us apart.
A young staffer, his face ashen, rushed to her side, holding a stack of printed social media comments. His voice quivered.
They're spreading the hashtag Gabriella fraud. It's trending at the top, ma'am.
Gabriella slowly rose to her feet. The room fell silent at once, every gaze snapping toward her. For a moment, the chaos seemed to pause, the weight of her presence commanding attention. She took a deep breath, her voice cutting through the tension with a calm yet undeniable authority.
First, I need everyone to stop panicking. Breathe. This isn't the first time we've faced injustice, and it won't be the last. But every time, we've prevailed. This time will be no different.
Her gaze turned to her trusted assistant.
Anna, I need a full financial report for the past year from the foundation. Include receipts from every recent trip. We won't just deny these allegations. We'll prove them wrong.
The tension in the room began to ease, though the gravity of the situation lingered. Staff members exchanged nods, the confidence in Gabriella's voice sparking a renewed sense of purpose. The clicking of keyboards resumed, not with panic, but with focused determination. Gabriella turned her attention back to the TV. The report continued, each word dripping with venom. A commentator's voice chimed in.
If these accusations are true, Gabriella Jenkins' career won't just crumble. It could shatter the trust of thousands who believed in the fight for justice.
Her image on the screen, once a beacon of hope, had been twisted into a weapon against her. But rather than falter, Gabriella's jaw tightened, and her hand curled into a fist. She spoke to her team, her tone unwavering.
Prepare a press conference. They want to destroy us with lies. Then we'll fight back. with the truth.
She turned and strode toward the center of the room, her eyes blazing with determination. The energy in the office shifted, the staff galvanizing under her resolve. What had been a scene of chaos transformed into the unified hum of preparation, like soldiers readying for battle. Behind her, the screen continued to replay the accusations, but Gabriella didn't look back. Her focus was unshakable. Her fight wasn't just for her name, it was for everything she had built and the people she had vowed to protect. Outside the building, a dense crowd of reporters and onlookers gathered, nearly blocking the entire exit. Night had fallen, but the blinding flashes of cameras, the harsh glare of news vans, and the neon lights of the city made the street glow like daylight. Broadcast trucks from major networks lined the curb, their towering antennas raised high, as if bracing to capture every second of what was clearly a pivotal event. The biting chill of the evening air only heightened the tension. Murmurs rippled through the crowd like an undercurrent, mingling with the steady hum of broadcast equipment and the occasional snap of a camera. Gabriella emerged, the automatic glass doors slid open, and Gabriella stepped out with a deliberate stride. Her white suit caught the light from the camera flashes, making her an unmistakable figure amidst the chaotic sea of bodies and noise. She held her head high, her gaze sweeping across the mass of people before her, as though calculating her next move. The moment she appeared, the cacophony erupted.
Gabriella Jenkins, do you have any comment on the allegations? How much money did you embezzle from the charity? Your supporters want answers. Are you denying the claims?
Microphones and cameras surged forward, their relentless presence almost swallowing her whole. The voices came rapid fire, sharp and impatient, each one demanding a response. Gabriella paused for a moment, her sharp eyes scanning the crowd. Her face betrayed no panic, only an intense focus. Her hand tightened slightly on the strap of her bag, steadying herself against the storm of questions. She drew in a deep breath, preparing to speak, when a sudden movement on her left caught her attention. A man emerged from the crowd. He wore a dark coat and faded jeans, his disheveled hair giving him the look of someone who had endured a long, grueling day. In his hand, he held a thick stack of documents, which he waved high above his head, ensuring every camera could capture the moment. The accuser, his voice loud, agitated.
I'm a former employee of the Resilience Foundation. I have proof that Gabriella Jenkins used charity funds for personal expenses. These are internal documents that expose the truth.
The crowd erupted like an explosion. The low murmur became a chaotic roar as reporters shoved forward, eager to catch a glimpse of the so-called evidence. The flashes of cameras intensified, strobing relentlessly.
Show the proof. Let the camera see. Gabriella, do you deny this?
Gabriella's staff, struggling to maintain order, seemed powerless to contain the chaos. A young assistant began to move toward her, protective instincts kicking in, but Gabriella raised a hand, stopping them in their tracks. For a brief second, Gabriella stood still, stunned by the unexpected turn. Her eyes fixed on the stack of documents the man waved so triumphantly. She let her gaze drift over the sea of faces, every one of them waiting for her to crack, to falter. Inside, a wave of anger and disappointment surged. How could they distort the truth so blatantly? But Gabriella pushed the emotions down, burying them beneath an impenetrable calm. She straightened her posture, taking a step forward. Her piercing gaze locked onto the accuser, cutting through the crowd like a blade. Gabriella, her voice clear, unwavering.
So, this is how you choose to attack me, with baseless accusations, relying on unverified documents. This is the very face of injustice that I have dedicated my career to fighting against.
She paused, her eyes flicking to the cameras, her expression sharpening like steel. Gabriella continuing, her tone like a challenge.
I urge all of you, journalists, viewers, verify the truth for yourselves, because in the end, truth always prevails.
The man hesitated, clearly thrown by Gabriella's composure. He waved the stack of documents more aggressively, his voice rising as if to regain control.
These documents are real? You can't keep running from this. The people deserve to know the truth.
But Gabriella didn't flinch. Her voice, now lower but even stronger, carried over the noise. Gabriella.
And I have the right to defend myself against baseless accusations. I am not running, but I will not allow anyone to weaponize lies to destroy what we have built.
For a brief moment, silence rippled through the crowd. The reporters, though still murmuring, seemed momentarily subdued by the sheer conviction in her words. Gabriella's gaze lingered on the man, then swept back to the cameras. Her staff began to move with renewed purpose, rallying behind her leadership. Gabriella to her team, resolutely.
Prepare a press conference. They want to bring us down with lies? Then we'll answer them with...
Without another glance at the accuser, Gabriella turned and strode forward, her shoulders straight, her expression unyielding. Behind her, the crowd roared on, but the atmosphere had shifted. Her defiance had pierced through the chaos, igniting a spark of doubt in the frenzy. The cameras continued to capture her every move, but Gabriella didn't look back. All that remained in her was determination of fire that no storm of accusations could extinguish. Gabriella stood in the center of a restless crowd that pressed in on her from all sides. The relentless flashes of cameras cast cold white light across her face, illuminating every detail. Reporters jostled for position, thrusting their microphones forward, while curious bystanders gathered behind the barriers, their phones raised high to capture the spectacle. The air was thick with noise, the hum of frantic conversations, the tapping of keyboards as reporters live-streamed the scene, and the shouted questions of those desperate to be heard. Gabriella stood tall at the epicenter, her shoulders squared like a shield against the onslaught. Inside her, a storm churned, but her face betrayed none of it. She was calm, resolute, every inch the warrior facing a battleground. A young reporter, dressed in a dark coat, pushed through the throng and leaned forward, his voice rising above the cacophony. Young reporter.
Ms. Jenkins, how do you respond to the allegations that you embezzled funds from the Resilience Foundation? Do you deny these claims?
Gabriella steady, with conviction.
Deny them? I won't just deny them. I will prove that every word you've heard is a lie.
She stepped forward, just a fraction, her sharp gaze cutting through the crowd like a blade. Her hand rested firmly on the strap of her bag, a subtle but commanding gesture that suggested she was ready for anything. Her posture remained unyielding, though the weight of the moment pressed heavily upon her. Another reporter, his voice edged with aggression, seized the opportunity. Second reporter.
But Ms. Jenkins, the documents released show questionable expenditures from your foundation. How do you explain these irregularities? Criticism is spreading like wildfire on social media. What's your plan?
Gabriella paused, her gaze lifting momentarily as if gathering her thoughts with surgical precision. She exhaled slowly before her voice rang out, clear and forceful, cutting through the noise like an arrow. Gabriella.
I will not let baseless accusations overshadow the truth. I pledge to make all financial records from the Resilience Foundation fully transparent, every transaction, every expense, so that anyone can see the facts for themselves. I will not rest until the truth is laid bare.
The crowd of reporters buzzed, some murmuring to each other while others typed feverishly, capturing her every word. The rhythm of camera flashes and keyboard clicks accelerated, but the energy was shifting, less frenzied, more focused. A third reporter, emboldened, pressed further, attempting to corner her third reporter.
And if you can't prove your innocence, Ms. Jenkins, will you take responsibility? Are you prepared to resign?
Gabriella tilted her head slightly, her lips pressing together in a moment of measured thought. When she spoke, her voice carried an edge of steel. Gabriella.
I am not afraid of accountability because I know I've done nothing wrong. What I ask is for patience, for people not to fall prey to unverified stories. I have spent my life fighting for truth and justice, and I will not back down now because of a lie.
She lowered her hand from her bag and placed both hands on her hips, a gesture of undeniable strength. Her gaze locked onto the cameras, piercing not just the reporters before her, but seemingly reaching the countless viewers watching from afar. Gabriella continuing, unwavering.
I know those spreading these falsehoods hope to see me silenced, to see me afraid. But I say this to you here and to everyone watching. I am not afraid. The truth is stronger than any lie, and when it is revealed, I expect those responsible for these deceptions to face the consequences as well.
Her words struck the crowd like a hammer. For a moment, the noise faltered. Some reporters looked down, scribbling hastily, while others exchanged uncertain glances. The once deafening clamor dulled into something more restrained, as if her confidence had forced them to reconsider the validity of the allegations. The scene was still electric, but Gabriella had taken control of it, her presence towering amidst the chaos. Her words carried not just a defense but a challenge, leaving those who opposed her scrambling to keep up. Gabriella walked through the throng of reporters, the relentless flashes of cameras firing behind her, as if desperate to capture a final image of the accused woman. The eyes in the crowd followed her every step, some filled with doubt, others with anger, but among them were a few glimmers of silent respect. Her steps were deliberate, her heels striking the damp pavement with steady, resolute clicks, each sound like the heartbeat of her unwavering determination. The night sky was black and heavy, but the glow of streetlights and the reflections of headlights on the wet asphalt framed her figure with an almost regal aura. Michael stood by the sleek black SUV parked near the curb, his face etched with worry, yet his gaze steady and unyielding. He opened the car door for Gabriella, his hand lingering on the frame, as if to shield her from the immense weight pressing down on her shoulders. Gabriella slid into the car without a word, her gaze fixed straight ahead. The door shut behind her, and the chaos of the outside world was instantly silenced, replaced by a charged, uneasy stillness. She placed her bag on the seat beside her and leaned back, closing her eyes for a fleeting moment, as though to find a shred of calm amidst the storm. But before she could fully exhale, the sharp chime of her phone shattered the silence. She retrieved it from her pocket, the screen glowing with Michael's name. The urgency in his voice was immediate as she answered. Michael on the phone, low and urgent.
Gabby, listen to me. This isn't just about your reputation. I just got some intel. This might be part of something bigger, a coordinated effort to take you and the foundation down.
Gabriella was silent for a few seconds, her fingers tightening instinctively around the phone. The faint glow of the dashboard illuminated her face, sharpening the intensity in her eyes. It wasn't fear that darkened them, it was focus, and the flicker of fury beginning to ignite. Gabriella, voice low, razor sharp.
Do you know who's behind it?
Michael.
Not yet, but I'm working on it. Gabby, you need to be careful. This isn't just a media battle. They'll stop at nothing to silence you.
Gabriella drew a deep breath, her gaze drifting from the phone to the car window. Outside, the streetlights blurred past, their muted glow a hazy reflection of the trials she'd overcome before. Reaching into her bag, she pulled out a small wallet. From it, she retrieved a photograph, a picture of Ava, her daughter, smiling radiantly in the sunshine of a schoolyard. Her fingers brushed lightly over the image, and for a moment, her expression softened. But then her eyes hardened, a fire of unshakable resolve igniting within them. Gabriella whispering to herself, her voice steel.
They have no idea who they're up against.
She slid the photograph into the pocket over her heart, a quiet reminder of why she could not falter. The SUV glided into the night, leaving behind the chaos of the crowd and the incessant flashes of cameras. Inside the dimly lit car, Gabriella's face was illuminated faintly by the passing lights, her expression resolute. It was clear to anyone who saw her now the real storm was only just beginning. Gabriella's office lay cloaked in a soft darkness, illuminated only by the cold, bluish glow of a computer screen. The expansive room, with its towering bookshelves and a large desk of dark wood, seemed even more somber under the overcast sky outside. Rain pattered against the wide glass window behind her desk, each droplet clinging briefly before streaking down, mirroring the tension that saturated the air. The silence was broken only by the rhythmic, almost frantic tapping of a keyboard, each keystroke adding weight to the oppressive stillness of the room. Gabriella sat behind the desk, the glow of the monitor highlighting her grave, contemplative expression. She wore a crisp white blouse, its sleeves rolled up to her elbows, exposing hands clenched tightly around a pen. Her eyes were fixed on the screen, not with the usual focus of someone immersed in work, but with the burdened look of someone grappling with an impossible dilemma. Beside her, on the desk, a coffee cup sat long forgotten. Its surface had grown cold, leaving behind faint brown rings on the porcelain, a quiet testament to the hours that had passed unnoticed. Across the room, Clara, a wiry woman with short cropped hair, sat at another computer, her face lit by the pale screen. Her fingers danced across the keyboard with urgent precision, pausing now and then to scroll through lines of data. Her wide eyes betrayed a sense of unease, as though she were trying to find something critical buried within the chaos. The rain outside continued its relentless rhythm. The clacking of Clara's keyboard, the faint rustle of papers as Gabriella flipped through a file, these were the only sounds in the room. It was a tension that felt like a taut wire, waiting for the slightest movement to snap. Suddenly, Clara stopped typing. The abrupt silence of her keyboard was jarring, slicing through the ambient noise. She swiveled in her chair, her expression frozen in a mix of confusion and alarm. Clara's voice urgent, hesitant.
"Ms. Jenkins?"
Gabriella didn't look up immediately, but her brows knitted slightly, sensing the unease in Clara's tone. Clara louder now, her voice breaking with urgency.
"You need to see this. Right now."
Clara pushed herself up from her chair, striding quickly toward Gabriella with her mouse in hand. She grabbed the edge of her monitor and turned it toward the desk, the screen flickering faintly as it revealed something alarming. The glow reflected sharply in Clara's wide, worried eyes. Gabriella leaned forward, setting the pen down and tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Her expression was momentarily puzzled, but it hardened quickly into something sharper as her gaze locked onto the screen. The light from the monitor bathed both women's faces, one etched with unease, the other now steely and focused. The rain outside continued to fall in a steady rhythm, but inside the room, the air felt thick, motionless, charged with the weight of whatever they had just uncovered. Clara leaned forward, her fingers trembling slightly as she scrolled through a series of emails displayed on the computer screen. The vague subject lines flickered in the dim light, but each one felt like a knife cutting into Gabriella's trust approval for special expenses not publicly disclosed. Urgent transfer, confidential request. Clara's voice broke the suffocating silence in the room, low but sharp enough to slice through the heavy air. "Clara."
"This is the largest transaction. $75,000 transferred to an untraceable personal account 3 weeks ago. She hid it through a secondary access point in the system."
Gabriella narrowed her eyes, scanning the screen. Her expression shifted from initial confusion to a dawning horror. Her brows furrowed deeply, as if searching for a rational explanation for the betrayal staring her in the face. She said nothing, but her hands clenched the armrests of her chair so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The atmosphere around her seemed to constrict, her fury simmering just beneath the surface, held back by sheer will. Clara hesitant, her voice barely above a whisper.
"There's more. I found these in the shared folder. She used her account to access internal funding requests. Emily's been doing this for at least 6 months."
The rain outside seemed to intensify, each drop striking the glass with relentless rhythm, like an omen of the storm brewing within the room. Clara's keyboard had gone silent, her hands frozen in place. She stood awkwardly by the desk, her eyes darting toward Gabriella, waiting for the inevitable explosion. Gabriella whispering, her voice low and ice-cold.
Emily?
That name, uttered like a spark, ignited the fury bubbling inside Gabriella. Emily, the person she had trusted, the one who had stood by her through the hardest times, was now the betrayer. Why? What was her motive? Questions flooded Gabriella's mind, but instead of succumbing to chaos, she channeled her anger into a focused, steely resolve. Taking a deep breath, she looked up at Clara, her voice steady and commanding Gabriella.
Call Emily. I want her here now. I want an explanation.
Clara hesitating, her hands clasped nervously.
Are you sure? Maybe we should handle this carefully. Try to avoid making things worse.
Gabriella cutting her off, her tone sharp as a blade.
Clara, this is the foundation we built with our blood, sweat, and tears. The people who trust us deserve the truth. I won't let this betrayal continue for another minute.
Clara hesitated, her anxiety written all over her face. She turned back to her computer, her fingers shaking slightly as she typed a message. Each keystroke echoed in the tense silence, a countdown to the inevitable confrontation. Gabriella rose from her chair and walked to the large window behind her desk. Crossing her arms, she stared out at the rain-soaked city below, the droplets streaking down the glass like tears. Reflected in the window, she saw her own image, a woman forced to confront betrayal and the shattering of trust. Clara stood from her seat, still looking uneasy. She stepped toward Gabriella, as though to say something, but stopped when Gabriella turned, her cold, piercing gaze cutting through the space between them. Gabriella, her voice low but firm, her back still to Clara.
Clara, did you send the message?
Clara, quiet, hesitant.
Yes, she'll be here in 10 minutes.
Gabriella nodded faintly, her eyes remaining fixed on the rain beyond the glass. Outside, the rhythmic patter of the rain mingled with the soft whistle of the wind, but inside the room, a heavy silence pressed down like a coiled spring waiting to snap. Her hand curled into a fist at her side, and a flicker of fire ignited in her eyes. Her voice, though quiet, carried the weight of iron.
Emily will answer for everything she's done.
The darkness in the office seemed to thicken as Emily stepped inside. She hesitated at the threshold, her reddened eyes darting briefly to Clara seated by the computer before locking onto Gabriella's piercing gaze. That sharp, blade-like stare froze Emily in her tracks, and her shoulders instinctively hunched, as though trying to shield herself from the weight of the confrontation. Gabriella stood at the center of the room, her arms crossed, the light from the overhead fixture casting harsh shadows across her resolute face. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the steady patter of rain against the large windows and the shallow, uneven breathing of Emily. Gabriella, her voice cold, every word slicing through the heavy stillness.
Emily, you know why I called you here, don't you?
Emily lowered her head, her gaze skittering away from Gabriella's unrelenting eyes. She stammered, her voice barely audible. Emily.
I'm news to me and I met your Miss Jenkins.
Gabriella moved slowly toward her desk, her fingers trailing over an open folder. Her eyes never left Emily as she picked up a sheet of paper and held it aloft. Gabriella.
Not sure? Let me help you.
She paused, her tone hardening.
$75,000. A transfer to an untraceable account, authorized by you.
Emily stumbled back a step, her breathing quickening. She stammered, her voice trembling. Emily.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Gabriella dropped the paper onto the desk with a sharp snap, the sound reverberating through the room. Her heels clicked against the wooden floor as she strode toward Emily, each step deliberate, commanding. Her voice, no longer icy, carried a restrained fury. Gabriella.
Don't know? Are you telling me that all the evidence Clara uncovered is just coincidence? That these illicit transactions magically appeared in the system? Emily, after everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me.
Emily lifted her tear-filled eyes, panic and shame warring on her face. Her voice broke as tears began to spill. Emily,
I didn't mean to betray you. I didn't know what else to do.
Gabriella cutting her off, her voice rising.
Didn't know what to do? You had a choice, Emily? The choice to come to me, to tell me the truth, instead of betraying me and everyone who put their trust in us.
Emily collapsed into sobs, her shoulders shaking. She clutched the edges of her coat, as if holding onto the last threads of stability. Emily,
They threatened my family. They sent me pictures of my daughter. They said they'd hurt her if I didn't do what they asked.
Gabriella froze. Emily's words struck like a sudden blow, extinguishing the flames of her anger for a fleeting moment. Her fists, clenched tightly at her sides, slowly relaxed, though her expression remained hard. Gabriella, her voice lower, but still cutting.
Who are they?
Emily's tear-streaked face tilted upward, desperation clouding her reddened eyes. Emily,
I don't know. They used anonymous messages, burner emails. They made me transfer the money to protect my daughter. I didn't want to. I swear I didn't mean to.
Gabriella stepped back, steadying herself against the desk. She inhaled deeply, her shoulders trembling as she fought to regain her composure. Inside, she was torn between searing disappointment, burning anger, and a reluctant pang of empathy. Gabriella, her voice shaking slightly.
Emily, do you think I don't understand that kind of fear? But what you did was wrong. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed everyone this foundation is fighting to help.
Emily crumpled to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. She raised her hands in a pleading gesture, her voice weak and broken. Emily,
I'm so sorry, Ms. Jenkins. Please, please help me. I don't know how to make it right.
Gabriella stared down at her, the pain of betrayal etched into her features. She crossed her arms tightly over her chest, taking a deep breath before speaking with steely resolve. Gabriella,
You've destroyed my trust, Emily. But I won't let the people behind this win.
Emily looked up, a fragile hope flickering in her tearful gaze. Emily,
You'll help me?
Gabriella firmly, her voice steady and unyielding.
I'll help you, but you must do your part. Tell me everything you know, every detail, every email, and when the truth comes out, you will face the consequences of your actions.
Emily nodded repeatedly, her tears flowing freely. Emily,
I'll do whatever it takes. I'll tell you everything.
Gabriella turned away, her eyes fixed on the rain-streaked window behind her desk. The soft drumming of the rain mingled with the faint whistling of the wind, a reminder of the battle raging beyond these walls. She clenched her jaw, her reflection staring back at her in the glass, a woman forced to confront betrayal but unyielding in her determination. Gabriella almost to herself, her voice firm yet quiet.
This isn't over, but I won't let them destroy everything I've built.
Behind her, Emily remained on the floor, her sobs fading into soft whimpers. Gabriella didn't look back. She knew the real fight was only beginning. The shadows in the office seemed to thicken as Gabriella stood still, her gaze sharp as a blade cutting through the dim light. Emily knelt before her, her small, trembling frame illuminated by the pale glow of the overhead lamp. Their shadows stretched across the polished wooden floor, intertwined, a stark contrast between anger and fear. Outside, the rain hammered against the windows with increasing intensity, echoing the storm brewing within the room. Gabriella took a deep breath, her composure razor-sharp as she leaned forward, lowering herself to Emily's level. Their faces were close enough that Emily had no choice but to meet Gabriella's piercing stare. Gabriella's eyes burned with cold determination, though a faint flicker of sympathy lingered beneath the surface. Her voice, low and deliberate, sliced through the tense silence.
Emily, look at me.
Emily flinched. Her hands, which had been covering her face, slowly dropped. She didn't lift her head fully, her swollen, tear-streaked eyes peeking up through disheveled hair.
I said, look at me.
Gabriella repeated, her tone firmer, pulling Emily out of the pit of despair she had buried herself in. Emily finally raised her head, her watery gaze locking onto Gabriella's unyielding eyes. Her entire body quaked as though the weight of Gabriella's scrutiny was too much to bear. Gabriella's voice was calm, but carried the force of a command.
See, I understand your fear. I know what it feels like to be powerless when your family is threatened. I've been there. But hear me clearly, Emily. Your silence doesn't protect anyone. It only strengthens the monsters behind this, making them bolder, cruel.
Tears fell freely from Emily's eyes, splattering against the floor as she whispered, her voice shattered with guilt.
I didn't have a choice. I just wanted to protect my daughter.
Gabriella leaned closer, her hands gripping the arms of the chair near Emily, forcing her to face the truth. Her face was stern, the pressure of her words palpable.
You always have a choice, Emily, and you made the wrong one.
Emily broke into sobs, the sound raw and unrestrained, merging with the relentless patter of rain outside. She buried her face in her hands again, her voice trembling like a child cornered.
They sent me pictures of my daughter. They said they'd hurt her if I didn't do what they asked. I didn't know what else to do. I never wanted to betray you.
Gabriella straightened, stepping back as if to catch her breath. Her own exhale was heavy, burdened with the weight of Emily's confession. She looked down at Emily, her expression etched with pain, not just from the betrayal but from the understanding of the desperate fear that had driven it. After a moment, Gabriella steadied herself. Her voice, though softer, carried a steel-like edge.
I will protect your family, Emily, but only if you stand with us.
Emily's tear-filled eyes widened, a spark of hope flickering amidst her anguish. Gabriella continued, her gaze unwavering, each word carving its way into Emily's consciousness.
You will help me expose them, or you will lose everything. This isn't the time to kneel and cry, Emily. It's the time to stand and fight.
Emily hesitated, her fingers clawing at the floor as her conflicted emotions played out on her face. She looked up at Gabriella, then down again, as though searching for an answer she didn't know how to find. Gabriella didn't wait. She stood tall, turning her back to Emily. Her words carried the finality of a verdict.
You can keep running and let them win, or you can do the right thing. The choice is yours, Emily, but I won't wait forever.
Emily's sobs slowed, her breathing uneven. She raised her head, her voice barely a whisper but trembling with a fragile resolve.
Yours easy. I'll do whatever you need.
Gabriella turned back, her eyes locking onto Emily's. She nodded, but her expression remained firm, unyielding.
Good, because this isn't just about your family. It's about everyone who is counting on us.
Emily lowered her head again, her shoulders still shaking, though she began to draw deeper breaths, as if bracing herself for what lay ahead. Gabriella glanced at Clara, who had remained silent in the corner of the room, watching the scene unfold. Their eyes met, and Gabriella gave a slight nod. Clara understood and exited the room, leaving the two women alone. Gabriella turned toward the large window, her hand resting against the cold glass. The darkness beyond stretched endlessly, punctuated by the steady rain. In her reflection, she saw a woman standing at the precipice of betrayal and resolve. Somewhere deep in the shadows of the storm outside, a faint glimmer of light began to emerge. Her voice, quiet yet resolute, broke the silence.
This isn't over, but I won't let them destroy what I've built.
Behind her, Emily remained on the floor, her quiet sobs fading into muffled breaths. Gabriella didn't turn around. She knew the true battle was only beginning. She turned, the steady click of her heels against the hardwood floor punctuating each determined step toward the door. Every movement carried an unshakable resolve, a silent declaration of the battles yet to come. At the threshold, Gabriella paused, glancing back at Emily. For a fleeting moment, their eyes met. No words were exchanged, but Gabriella's gaze was heavy with meaning, a silent acknowledgement that the decision made in this room would shape not only Emily's future, but also the lives of all those they had sworn to protect. Gabriella turned away and stepped into the hallway. Light spilled in from outside, stretching her shadow long across the office floor, a figure of both commanding presence and burdened purpose. Inside, Clara approached Emily, who remained on the floor, her shoulders slumped, arms wrapped around her knees. Clara crouched beside her, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. Her voice, though calm, carried an edge of urgency.
"We don't have much time."
Emily lifted her head, her tear-streaked eyes glassy and lost. She stared toward the door where Gabriella had just disappeared, the weight of the choice she'd made settling heavily in her chest.
"I or shall do it," she asked.
Emily stammered, her voice trembling but tinged with a faint trace of resolve. Clara nodded, giving her shoulder a reassuring squeeze before rising to her feet. She cast a glance toward the door, where light from the hallway still spilled in, its glow a stark contrast to the tension saturating the room. The sound of rain tapping against the window filled the silence, each drop counting down the moments to the inevitable confrontation. The glow of the computer screen illuminated Gabriella's face, sharpening her resolute features and the storm of controlled anger simmering beneath the surface. Emily, still kneeling, kept her head bowed, unable to meet the cold, calculating gaze of the woman she had betrayed. Gabriella turned away, her fists clenched tightly, her knuckles white.
"You will make this right, and I will make sure they pay."
Gabriella's words cut through the air like a blade, each syllable landing with the weight of a final judgment. She strode out of the office, her tall, unyielding figure casting a long shadow down the dimly lit hallway. Her eyes burned with an inextinguishable fire, a testament to her unrelenting determination. Less than an hour later, the phone in the darkened office rang. Gabriella and Michael sat across from it, their expressions grim and unreadable. Neither spoke a word, but the tension between them spoke volumes. They both knew this was the beginning of the fight's final, most dangerous phase.
What do you think Gabriella will do next? Share your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear from you.
The room was swallowed by darkness, save for the faint, golden glow of the desk lamp on Gabriella's workspace. Its light cast soft, uneven shadows, illuminating the faint grain of the wood beneath it. At the center of the desk lay a silent, motionless phone, yet it seemed to radiate an invisible weight, pulling the attention of everyone in the room. Outside the large window, the rain fell relentlessly, each drop striking the glass with a fierce rhythm, as if trying to shatter the tense silence inside. The wind howled through unseen cracks, carrying with it the sound of a furious sky, weaving an ominous and unending symphony. Michael stood near the window, his face caught in the dim light filtering in from outside. The shadows accentuated the sharp lines of his features, making his expression appear even more severe. His arms were crossed tightly over his chest, but the restless shift of his eyes toward the phone betrayed his unease. His feet moved in a slow, deliberate pace, each step heavy, as though he were walking a tightrope of barely contained anger and anxiety. Gabriella sat rigid in her chair, her posture unwavering like a monument carved from stone. Her hands gripped the arms of the chair so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. The golden light from the lamp highlighted the intensity on her face, a mask of stern focus and unyielding determination. Though her eyes remained fixed on the phone, her gaze carried more than anticipation. It was a readiness to confront whatever lay ahead. Neither spoke. The room was filled only with the sounds of the wind and the rain, each drop striking the window, as if counting down to an inevitable moment. Michael cast a glance toward Gabriella, his lips pressed into a tight line. He looked as though he wanted to say something, but the tension in the air stopped him. He knew that no words could lighten the weight of the weight. Gabriella exhaled slowly, her gaze unwavering. Time dragged on, each second stretching unbearably, amplifying the suffocating atmosphere. Every element of the room, the dim light, the relentless storm outside, the oppressive silence between them felt like it was bracing for the moment the phone would finally ring, shattering the fragile stillness that had taken hold. The dark room grew heavier with tension after the first ring of the phone. Gabriella didn't rush to answer. The dim light from the desk lamp cast shadows across her face, illuminating the strain etched into her features. Near the window, Michael stood motionless, the faint glow from the street outside slicing his face into two halves, one stark and cold in the light, the other consumed by shadow. The wind howled through cracks in the windows, blending with the relentless hammering of rain, a sound like nature's fury tearing through the fragile silence of the room. Gabriella glanced at Michael, their eyes locking for a fleeting moment of unspoken understanding. She drew in a deep breath and pressed the answer button.
"Gabriella Jenkins?"
she said. Her voice was steady, cold, but carried a faint tremor at the edges. On the other end, a voice responded low and chilling, as though the speaker were standing right there in the room.
"So you finally picked up?"
Michael froze mid-step, his footfall halting on the hardwood floor. His sharp gaze fixed on the phone, his body taut with tension. Gabriella narrowed her eyes, her hand gripping the phone tighter.
"I don't like wasting time."
Gabriella replied, her voice cutting but her tightly controlled breathing betraying the storm within.
Speak.
The voice on the line let out a quiet, mocking chuckle and icy sound that slithered through the room like a draft, making Gabriella's brow furrow.
Speak straight to business. I like that. But this isn't about you this time. It's about your daughter."
Michael's breath caught, and his fists clenched at his sides. He stepped closer to the desk, his every movement deliberate but trembling with restrained fury. Gabriella leaned back in her chair, though her posture didn't relax. Her eyes widened for a brief moment before hardening into steel.
"Ava is safe."
The voice continued, slow and deliberate.
"For now, but her safety depends entirely on you, Gabriella."
For a heartbeat, time seemed to freeze. Gabriella closed her eyes, the weight of those words crashing over her like a tidal wave. When she opened them again, they were sharp, resolute.
"What do you want?"
she asked, her tone dropping, heavy as lead and brimming with quiet menace. The chuckle returned, more pointed this time, as though the speaker reveled in her fear.
"It's simple. A confession. You will take the stage in front of the press and admit to everything. Say you embezzled the funds. Say you're a fraud. Do that and your daughter comes home safe. It's easy, isn't it?"
Gabriella's knuckles whitened as her grip tightened on the phone. Her jaw clenched. She glanced at Michael, whose fury was now barely contained. He moved closer, slamming his palm onto the desk with a force that made the objects on it tremble.
"Do you think I'll comply with such cheap threats?"
Gabriella ground out, each word deliberate and filled with venom. The line went silent for a moment, the weight of the pause pressing down on the room. Then, the voice returned, slower, more measured, each word deliberately etched into Gabriella's mind.
"Cheap threats? I don't think so. I'm just stating facts. If you don't do as I say, I can't promise Ava's safety. You're a mother, Gabriella. You understand that, don't you?"
Michael began pacing the room, each step echoing like thunder. His jaw was tight, his nostrils flared as he tried to suppress the rage simmering beneath his calm exterior.
"Gabby, we need to call the police,"
he said urgently, his voice breaking through the thick tension. His eyes pleaded with her, desperate for a solution. Gabriella didn't respond immediately. She closed her eyes, inhaling deeply once more. When she opened them, they burned with unflinching determination.
"If you harm my daughter,"
she said, her voice slicing through the air with deadly precision,
"I swear I will destroy everything you have."
The voice on the other end remained unfazed.
"That's up to you, Gabriella,"
it replied smoothly.
"Confess, and this all ends peacefully. Think of Ava."
The call ended with a single, prolonged beep that felt like a blade slicing through the suffocating atmosphere. Gabriella lowered the phone, placing it on the desk with deliberate calm. Her breaths were shallow, her chest rising and falling rapidly, but her eyes gleamed with an unrelenting fire. She looked up at Michael, who was pacing furiously once again, his movements punctuated by his mounting frustration. Outside, the storm raged on, its fury a pale shadow of the tempest brewing within the room. Michael paced the dark room, his heavy footsteps thudding against the wooden floor, each one pressing down as if trying to crush the suffocating silence. Outside, the wind howled, and the rain lashed against the windows, creating a relentless cacophony that mirrored the storm raging within the room. He stopped abruptly, spinning around to face Gabriella, who remained seated, unmoving, like a marble statue carved from cold resolve amidst the shadows.
"Gabby, we can't handle this alone."
His voice cut through the room, deep and forceful, but trembling beneath its intensity.
"Ava needs protection now. The police, the FBI, someone. We can't do this by ourselves."
Gabriella didn't respond immediately. Her eyes stayed fixed on the phone lying still on the desk, as if calculating every possibility, every consequence of the choices ahead. Finally, she lifted her head, the soft golden glow from the desk lamp catching the sharp edges of her face, her eyes a mixture of cold determination and buried anguish.
"And if I go to the police, Michael, they'll know. They're watching everything. Don't forget, they have Ava. I can't take that risk."
Michael took a step closer, throwing his hands up in frustration.
"And what other option do we have? We don't know who they are, where they are, or what they really want. You're letting them control you, Gabby."
Gabriella sat upright, her hands gripping the arms of the chair so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her voice dropped, every word like a needle driving into Michael's heart.
"I'm not letting them control me. I'm protecting Ava. If following their demands keeps her safe, that's all that matters."
Michael shook his head vehemently, his hands curling into fists. He strode to the desk, planting both hands firmly on its surface, leaning in close to Gabriella. His voice cracked, a mix of fury and desperation.
"You think they'll keep their word? Gabby, they'll kill her no matter what you do. They leave no loose ends for anyone to fight back."
Gabriella raised her head, her eyes locking onto his with unflinching resolve, though a deep pain glimmered beneath the surface. Her voice sharpened, cutting through the air like a blade.
"Do you think I don't know that? Do you think I'm not terrified? But we don't have time, Michael. If they even suspect we're stalling or going to the authorities, what happens to Ava then?"
Michael slammed his hand on the desk, the sound reverberating through the tense room. His bloodshot eyes bore into hers, frustration and helplessness consuming him. He stepped back, running his hands through his hair before turning to face her again. His voice dropped to a broken plea.
"What are we doing, Gabby? You're handing yourself over to them. Ava doesn't need a hero willing to sacrifice everything. She needs her mother."
For a moment, Gabriella faltered. Something softened in her eyes, a crack in her armor. But it was fleeting. She stood, the light from the desk lamp casting her features into sharp relief, every line of her face etched with unwavering determination.
"I'm not a hero, Michael. I'm a mother. And a mother will do whatever it takes to protect her child."
Michael moved closer, his hands reaching toward her shoulders, then falling uselessly to his sides. His voice lowered, almost pleading.
"Gabby, I understand, but we have to be smarter than this. Don't let them control us."
Gabriella turned to him, her eyes blazing with fierce determination, though her tone remained measured, controlled.
"I'm not being controlled, Michael. I'm making a choice. The only choice I have to keep Ava safe is to play by their rule."
Michael stared at her, his own anguish reflected in his eyes. Words failed him as he watched the woman he loved preparing to step into a battle where everything was at stake. Gabriella turned back to the desk, her gaze falling once more on the phone. Her hands clenched briefly at her sides before relaxing. Her voice, steady and resolute, carried the weight of a vow.
"They think they've won, but I won't let that happen."
Michael stood frozen, the storm of emotion swirling between them palpable. Outside, the rain pounded against the glass like the relentless ticking of a clock, counting down the precious seconds slipping away, taking with them everything they held dear. The phone buzzed again, its small sound reverberating through the dimly lit room like an ominous alarm. Gabriella didn't hesitate. She picked it up with a swift, deliberate motion, sitting upright in her chair. The warm golden glow of the desk lamp cast sharp shadows on her face, accentuating the unyielding tension etched into her features.
"This is Gabriella. What do you want next?"
Her voice was low, devoid of emotion, but her knuckles whitened as she gripped the phone tightly, betraying the storm roiling beneath her composed exterior. A deep, chilling voice responded on the other end, each word carefully measured, designed to burrow into her mind.
"We need you to do one final task before we make our decision."
Gabriella's brow furrowed slightly, suspicion flashing in her eyes. Her voice, however, remained steady.
"What task?" "A transfer. We've prepared everything, and all you need to do is sign. Transfer full control of the Resilience Foundation to us. In return, your daughter will be safe."
The demand hit like a punch to the gut, momentarily knocking the air out of Gabriella. Her breathing grew heavier, but she quickly tamped down the whirlwind of emotions surging inside her.
"You must be joking,"
she said, her tone laced with defiance.
"This isn't just money. It's the lives of thousands of people."
The voice on the other end grew colder, sharper, as if relishing her torment.
"It's your choice, Gabriella. The lives of thousands or your daughter's life. We don't have time for negotiations."
Gabriella closed her eyes, her grip on the phone tightening until her fingers turned pale. Outside, the rain battered against the windows, each drop mirroring the frantic beating of her heart.
"I'll need time to review the transaction,"
she said, her voice trembling ever so slightly, though her resolve remained intact.
"I'll do it, but give me 24 hours.
A pause lingered on the line, thick with unspoken threats. Then the voice returned, unyielding.
"You don't have much time, and don't even think about trying anything clever. We're watching your every move."
The line went dead with a long, droning beep. Gabriella slammed the phone down on the desk, her wide eyes gleaming not with fear, but with the spark of defiance. Michael, standing nearby, rushed to her side.
"What do they want now, Gabby? You can't do what they're asking."
Gabriella rose from her chair, the light from the desk lamp casting sharp angles on her face. She turned to face him, her expression a mix of steely determination and bitter frustration.
"They want the foundation, full control of Resilience."
Michael's eyes widened, his fists clenching at his sides.
"They're insane. You can't give them the foundation, Gabby. That's your life's work. It's the lifeline for thousands of people who depend on it."
Gabriella stepped closer, placing a firm hand on his shoulder in an attempt to steady him.
"I know, and I won't let them have it, but they need to think I'm going to comply."
Michael stared at her, his skepticism evident.
"What's your plan? We're up against people who'll stop at nothing to get what they want."
A faint smile played on Gabriella's lips, one tinged with resolve and just a hint of irony. She turned back to her desk, powering on her laptop. The screen's glow lit her face, highlighting her unrelenting focus.
"They think they're in control, but they've forgotten one thing. I built this foundation from the ground up. Every system, every process, every safeguard, it's all designed by me."
Her fingers flew across the keyboard, opening files, documents, and transaction logs, each one a thread in the intricate web she had woven to protect the foundation.
"They want to play this game? Fine. I'll create a false transfer, a trap. The moment they move on it, their entire operation will be exposed."
Michael watched her, the tension in his face slowly giving way to admiration for the fierce determination radiating from her.
"So what's the next step?"
he asked, his voice steadying. Gabriella didn't look up, her fingers still moving rapidly as she executed her plan. Her voice was calm, deliberate.
"The next step they'll think they've won. But in the next 24 hours, I'll turn them from the hunters into the hunted.
Gabriella leaned over her desk, the glow from her laptop casting a resolute glint in her eyes. Her fingers moved swiftly across the keyboard, pulling up files like pieces of a puzzle fitting into a grand, intricate picture. The Resilience Foundation system wasn't just a repository of financial documents, it was a trove of information, the lives she'd touched, the allies she'd worked with, and the digital breadcrumbs their enemies had no idea they'd left behind.
All right, let's start here,
Gabriella murmured, her voice low and razor-sharp. Michael stood nearby, his watchful eyes tracking her every move, his unease etched into his posture.
Gabby, what exactly are you working with? How much can we even do with the time we've got?
Without glancing at him, Gabriella's fingers continued to fly across the keyboard.
The Foundation's security system doesn't just protect us, it monitors unusual activity.
She pulled up a file, lines of encrypted data glowing against the dark background.
Suspicious transactions they've made. Every one of them ties back to an anonymous account.
She tapped a few keys, breaking through layers of encryption, until a list of IP addresses and transaction traces appeared on the screen, each one linked in a web of connections.
This is their weakness. They don't realize the system has been tracking their every move for the last 6 months.
Gabriella paused and turned to Michael, her gaze cutting through the tension like a blade.
But that's not enough. I'm not just going to track them. I'm going to make them come into the light.
Michael furrowed his brow, suspicion flickering across his face.
How? How do you plan to expose them?
Gabriella leaned in closer to the screen and opened a meticulously detailed file. A step-by-step plan illuminated the monitor, outlining a counterstrike in bold precision.
First, I need allies. There are still people I trust in my old intelligence circles. They can help us trace the leads, pinpoint Ava's location, and figure out where these bastards are operating from.
She grabbed her phone and dialed a number with practiced ease. When the line connected, her voice dropped to a calm but commanding tone.
I need you now. Same location as before. Bring surveillance equipment. Everything we'll need to pinpoint a location.
Hanging up, she turned back to Michael.
Second, we need to make them believe I'm surrendering. I'll send them a fake agreement, but embedded in it will be malware. The moment they open it, their entire network will be exposed.
Michael nodded slowly, though concern lingered in his eyes.
Gabby, you're walking a dangerous line. If they figure out what you're doing, Ava,
his voice broke slightly,
they'll hurt her without hesitation.
Gabriella stopped typing and softened her gaze, stepping closer to him. Her hand rested firmly on his shoulder, steadying him.
Michael, I know, but if we don't act, Ava stays their prisoner. I can't sit and do nothing. This is the only way to get her back.
She returned to her desk, her voice firm once again.
Next, I'll tap into the Foundation's emergency reserves. It was set up for situations exactly like this. I'll move part of the funds to create a false trail so they think I'm complying. That buys us time.
Michael stepped closer, the tension in his features giving way to a growing sense of admiration.
And who else is helping us? Beyond your old contacts?
Gabriella opened another file, a carefully maintained list of organizations and individuals who had once collaborated with her and the Foundation.
I'm reaching out to the people we've helped. Some of them now work in positions that can provide intelligence or technical support. This isn't just about us. This is about protecting everything resilience stands for and everyone it's touched.
She dialed another number and waited. When the line connected, her voice carried both urgency and conviction.
We need your support. This isn't just about my family. It's about everything we've built together. I'll send you the details through an encrypted channel.
Hanging up, Gabriella straightened, her eyes blazing with determination.
Michael, I'm not just bringing Ava home. I'm going to teach them a lesson. That no one, no matter how powerful, can touch my family or what we've built without paying the price.
Michael nodded, his shoulders relaxing as a glimmer of hope took hold. He knew Gabriella wasn't just improvising, she was strategizing, executing, fighting with every ounce of her will. This time, he thought, the hunters wouldn't win. Gabriella stood upright, her hands gripping the edge of the desk as though grounding herself against the storm of thoughts raging in her mind. The soft glow of the desk lamp cast light on her face, highlighting eyes filled with resolve but shadowed by unspoken pain. Scattered documents littered the desk, and at the center of it all lay a small USB drive, tiny, yet weighted with the gravity of the plan she had meticulously crafted. Michael lingered by the window, his gaze never leaving her. He watched as she picked up the USB, holding it tightly in her hand as if it were the key to saving Ava. Her movements were deliberate, each step towards the door echoing across the hardwood floor, each sound amplifying her unwavering determination. She paused at the threshold, her silhouette stretching across the room, a shadow made vast by the solitary lamp behind her.
"Gabby?"
Michael's voice trembled slightly, a last plea lingering on his lips, searching for the words to stop her. Gabriella tilted her head slightly, her shoulders still squared. Her voice, low and resolute, cut through the tension.
"Trust me, this is just the beginning."
Without another word, she stepped out, leaving the room cloaked in her absence. The soft click of the closing door muted the light spilling from within, leaving Michael staring at the lone USB glinting on the desk. To him, it was a fragile beacon, a flicker of hope in the oppressive darkness of the battle they now faced. Outside, the rain continued its relentless rhythm, mingling with the gusts of wind, creating a somber symphony for the war neither of them could afford to lose. In the shadowed quiet of another room, Gabriella stood motionless after the call, her eyes fixed on the phone, which still seemed to pulse with the weight of the threats that had just been spoken. Behind her, Michael approached, his grip firm on her shoulder, as though trying to anchor her amidst the emotional tempest they both were enduring.
"Gabby, we can't let them win,"
Michael said, his voice low, strained with both fear and determination. Gabriella turned, her cold gaze meeting his. Her nod wasn't one of agreement, but of certainty her choice had already been made.
"They want to make me a puppet, Michael. Fine. But I won't let them pull the strings forever. They'll pay for this."
Hours later, Gabriella stepped onto the stage for the press conference, the blinding glare of spotlights washing over her as cameras clicked incessantly. Every step she took felt heavier than the last, each one pulling her further into the heart of the most dangerous phase of the game. Her face betrayed nothing but resignation, a mask she wore with perfection. Yet beneath it, her mind churned with the stakes, the risks, the razor-thin margin for error. In that moment, she understood the full weight of the path she'd chosen, one where even the smallest misstep could cost her everything. Camera flashes flickered incessantly, illuminating the expansive auditorium in bursts of stark white light, while adding to the suffocating tension that hung in the air. The ceaseless clicks of shutters blended with the murmurs of hundreds of spectators and reporters packed tightly into rows of seats. Eyes filled with judgment, curiosity, and even disappointment all fixed on the stage, where a lone microphone stood waiting for Gabriella. The backstage door creaked open, and Gabriella stepped through. Her posture was instinctively upright, but her shoulders drooped slightly, as if bearing the weight of an entire world. Her tailored blazer and dark trousers projected composure, yet each of her movements betrayed the tension coursing through her. The harsh stage lights exposed every line on her face, her red-rimmed eyes from a sleepless night, her pallid complexion, and the weariness etched into her otherwise resolute features. Gabriella paused at the edge of the stage, drawing in a deep breath before stepping forward to the microphone. The sound of her heels clicking against the polished floor reverberated throughout the room, each step drawing out the crowd's mounting anticipation. Beneath the glaring lights, the confident facade she once wore so effortlessly was gone, replaced by a hollow stillness that shielded her true emotions from prying eyes. The murmurs from the crowd grew louder, a swell of whispered judgments rising like a tide.
What is she even going to say? An apology won't cut it. What a disappointment. She used to be someone we trusted.
The low hum of their voices thickened the air, an invisible fog of disdain and speculation that seemed to cling to Gabriella. The relentless clicks of cameras continued, each flash and snap like a hammer pounding against her already fraying nerves. She reached the microphone, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. For a fleeting moment, her eyes seemed to linger on each face, absorbing the disappointment, the hurt, the distrust radiating from their stares. Her hand rested on the microphone's stand, gripping it tightly as if anchoring herself against the storm around her. The room fell silent. The whispers ceased as the crowd collectively held its breath, waiting for the words they believed would define this moment, would decide her fate. To Gabriella, this was not just a speech, it was the moment she would sacrifice everything: her reputation, their trust, and perhaps even a piece of herself. But she knew it was the only way to save Ava. Gabriella gripped the microphone tightly, her knuckles turning white, as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. The air in the auditorium felt heavy, suffocating, as the stage lights illuminated her pale face, accentuating her red, swollen eyes, evidence of sleepless nights. Her lips pressed into a firm line, trembling as she wrestled with the words she knew would change everything. Taking a deep breath, Gabriella summoned the last shred of strength within her. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked, hoarse and unsteady.
"I was wrong."
The words fell like a bomb, shattering the taut silence in the room. A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd, building into a storm of whispers that quickly escalated into angry shouts.
"Fraud! She betrayed our trust. Gabriella Jenkins, you should be ashamed."
The relentless clicking of cameras punctuated the chaos, their flashing lights capturing every nuance of Gabriella's expression. Her eyes dropped to the floor, unable to meet the piercing stares directed at her. Behind her, the massive screen projected an enlarged image of her face, quivering lips, pallid skin, and eyes weighed down by grief. Gabriella forced herself to look up, her breath shallow and uneven. But as her gaze swept across the audience, the intensity of their judgment hit her like a physical blow. A few people in the crowd stood abruptly, their chairs scraping loudly against the floor as they stormed out. Their heavy footsteps echoed with condemnation, each one a hammer strike to her pride. In the front row, Gabriella's eyes locked with those of a middle-aged woman she recognized, a woman who had once been saved from financial ruin by the Resilience Foundation. The woman said nothing, but the sorrow and disappointment in her eyes spoke volumes. The trust that once glowed brightly there was gone, replaced by a cold void that pierced Gabriella to her core. It felt as though someone had drained all the air from the room. Gabriella's chest tightened and her knees wavered, but she clung to the microphone stand, using it as an anchor to keep herself upright. The boos grew louder, each accusation a dagger aimed straight at her heart.
"She doesn't deserve forgiveness. We trusted her, and this is what she does to us."
Gabriella stared at the stage floor, her heels rooted to the spot, as though they were nailed down, preventing her from fleeing the storm of outrage crashing over her. The blinding stage lights blurred her vision, yet the harsh words rang clear, each one slicing through her like a blade. Forcing herself to raise her head once more, she faced the crowd. But in that moment, a camera zoomed in, its unrelenting lens magnifying her every flaw. A wave of vulnerability washed over her, as though she were being stripped bare, her pain and failures exposed for all to see. On the screen behind her, Gabriella's image loomed large, not the strong, confident woman the public once revered, but a broken figure crumbling under the weight of disgrace. She was no longer a beacon of hope, but a fallen idol, tethered to accusations that seemed insurmountable. She inhaled deeply, but the air felt heavy, as though her lungs couldn't fully expand. The bitter taste of defeat rose in her throat, threatening to overwhelm her. For the first time, Gabriella understood the full cost of her sacrifice, her reputation, the public's trust, and perhaps most painfully, her own sense of self. The seconds stretched into what felt like an eternity. Her legs trembled, the ground beneath her seeming to give way, but she refused to fall, not yet. Tightening her grip on the microphone, she steadied herself, forcing her body to remain upright, even as her spirit fractured beneath the pressure. The whispers, the jeers, the unrelenting glare of the lights, they all continued, battering her resolve. Gabriella drew in another shaky breath, but this time it caught in her chest, heavy and strained. Among the crowd, there was no trace of support, no flicker of faith left in her. She had become a shadow, eclipsed by the weight of accusations and betrayal. In that moment, Gabriella realized the enormity of her loss. She had sacrificed everything: her name, her dignity, and the public's faith in her, all for the faint hope that Ava might still be saved. Yet the price she paid was crushing, far beyond what she had imagined. For a fleeting second, her legs threatened to buckle again, the stage beneath her seeming to dissolve into nothingness. But she clenched her fists tighter around the microphone, willing herself to endure the torrent for just a moment longer. The lights burned brighter, the crowd's voices grew louder, but Gabriella refused to let them see her break, not yet. Even as her heart splintered, she stood firm, knowing that her pain, her humiliation, her ruin, this was the price she had to pay. For Ava, for hope, for one last chance. Gabriella sat motionless in the backstage room, her shadow stretching long across the floor under the dim amber glow of the overhead light. The room felt oppressively silent, broken only by the steady patter of rain against the closed window. Nearby, a forgotten glass of water sat on the table, condensation beating on its surface like the sweat of unseen anxiety. Her head bowed low, hands gripping her knees tightly, as if anchoring herself against the storm of emotions swirling within. Her body felt leaden, every breath a laborious effort. The phantom echoes of the crowd's judgmental stares and scornful shouts reverberated through her mind, relentless and unyielding, dragging her deeper into despair. The door creaked open softly, the faint sound slicing through the suffocating stillness. Clara stepped inside, the light from the hallway casting a stark outline around her youthful but resolute face. Her low-heeled shoes made gentle sounds against the floor as she approached, each step deliberate, carrying a steadiness that seemed almost out of place in the tension-filled room. Clara stopped a few feet away, her gaze fixed on Gabriella. The light fell across Gabriella's face, highlighting swollen eyes, pale skin, and lips pressed together in a futile attempt to contain her emotions. Clara clenched her fists briefly, as if summoning the strength to face the woman she had always admired.
"You're not a quitter,"
Clara said firmly, her voice clear but gentle, as though wary of startling Gabriella.
"We still have options."
Gabriella slowly lifted her head, her red-rimmed eyes meeting Clara's. A faint, bitter smile curved her lips, not one of hope, but one laced with resignation.
"Options?"
Gabriella's voice was low, almost a whisper, tinged with a hollow sarcasm.
"What options, Clara, when everyone believes I'm a fraud? When everything I've fought to build has been reduced to ashes?"
Clara didn't respond immediately. She stepped closer and took a seat across from Gabriella, leaning forward to place a steadying hand on her shoulder. The warmth of Clara's palm made Gabriella flinch slightly, but she didn't pull away. Clara's gaze locked onto Gabriella's, unwavering and filled with quiet determination.
"They can take your reputation,"
Clara said, her words deliberate, each one cutting through the heavy air.
"But they can take the truth. What you've done, what resilience stands for, it doesn't disappear because of accusations. We'll reclaim it all, piece by piece."
Gabriella stared at Clara, her red, swollen eyes searching her face, as though looking for a shred of certainty to cling to. For a moment she seemed to weigh Clara's words, as if testing their strength against the crushing weight of her despair.
Clara, do you really think there's hope?
Gabriella's voice wavered, soft and fragile, but no longer shaking as it had been before.
Even when everything seems stacked against us?
Clara nodded slowly, a small but resolute smile forming on her lips.
We don't need everyone to believe in us right now. All we need is the truth. And the truth has a way of coming to light, if you have the courage to keep fighting.
Clara's words felt like a gentle breeze, slipping past the thick walls of despair Gabriella had built around herself. Gabriella inhaled deeply, her hands tightening on her knees again, not to suppress her emotions, but as a reminder that she could still stand. Her shoulders trembled slightly, but when she finally raised her head, there was a shift in her expression. The despair lingering in her gaze was now accompanied by a flicker of something else small, but undeniable.
All right, Clara?
Gabriella said, her voice firmer now, though still tinged with weariness.
What's the plan?
Clara's hand squeezed her shoulder gently, as if transferring a fraction of her own strength.
The first step, we find their weakness. Then we turn the tables.
Gabriella nodded slowly, her fingers loosening their grip. Though the exhaustion on her face was still evident, her eyes no longer held the same oppressive weight. The silence between them no longer felt stifling, it was purposeful, filled with an unspoken understanding and quiet resolve.
We start now,
Gabriella said, her voice steady, a hint of steel creeping back into her tone.
If they think I'm going to crumble, they've gravely underestimated me.
Clara's smile widened slightly, her eyes reflecting a spark of confidence. The two women sat across from each other, no further words needed, but both fully aware of what lay ahead. This wasn't just Gabriella's battle, it was theirs, a fight for everything they had built and everything they had vowed to protect. Gabriella entered the darkened room, the soft click of the door closing behind her sealing her solitude. The dim amber glow of a desk lamp cast long, slender shadows across the floor, its light illuminating the desk where everything had once begun and where, perhaps, it would now all come to an end. On the desk, amidst scattered documents and a dormant laptop, sat a small framed photograph of Ava. Her daughter's radiant smile, her innocent, bright eyes brimming with hope, stood as a painful reminder of the reason behind everything Gabriella had done. She stopped in her tracks, her feet seemingly rooted to the floor, her gaze fixed on the photo. A lump rose in her throat, thick and suffocating. Gabriella stepped forward, her trembling hands reaching for the frame, her fingers brushing gently against the glass, as if trying to touch the little girl captured within. And then the tears came. At first a few stray drops, but soon a torrent, uncontrollable and unrelenting. She sank into the chair, clutching the photo tightly, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Each muffled cry echoed in the empty room, a bitter confession to herself she was failing. Through her grief, images of past triumphs flickered through Gabriella's mind, like a slow reel of memories. She recalled the grand opening of the Resilience Foundation, the applause of hundreds who celebrated her vision to help thousands in crisis. She remembered the letters of gratitude, the congratulatory words of colleagues and friends, the admiration that had once shone in their eyes. But reality struck like a merciless hammer, shattering those memories with the cacophony of boos from the press conference, the cold stares, the harsh accusations. It felt as though everything she had built had crumbled, taking her reputation and her sense of self-worth with it.
What did I do wrong?
Gabriella whispered in despair, her voice hoarse, barely audible, as though the question itself might dissolve in the oppressive air. She placed Ava's photo back on the desk, her hands moving to cradle her head, tears still streaming freely. Her mind churned, caught between the past and present, between what she had achieved and what she had seemingly lost. Her eyes fell on the silent phone lying on the desk, its presence heavy and foreboding. Gabriella lifted her head, staring at it with a mix of dread and temptation. The thought of calling the adversaries flickered in her mind, a faint yet dangerous glimmer of possibility.
Just a little more time,
she thought, her hand reaching toward the phone. But as her fingertips brushed its surface, she froze, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. The very notion of begging, of conceding defeat to those who sought to destroy everything she had fought for, felt like the ultimate betrayal not just to herself, but to everything and everyone she had vowed to protect. Gabriella sat motionless, her red-rimmed eyes locked on the phone, as if it were daring her to make a choice. In that moment, the darkness of the room seemed to press closer, as though the entire world were waiting to see what she would do next. The phone buzzed, jolting her from her stillness. A message from Clara appeared on the screen, the words stark and cutting through the heavy gloom.
"I found something that could turn the tide."
Gabriella stared at the message, her finger hovering over the screen, as though she could feel the weight of every word. A faint glimmer of hope sparked in her eyes, quickly tempered by a shadow of doubt.
"Really?"
she murmured, almost to herself.
Could this truly be the answer, or just another failure waiting to happen?
But the glowing screen remained steady, unyielding, as if silently insisting that inaction was the greatest failure of all. Gabriella drew in a deep breath, raising a hand to wipe the lingering tears from her cheeks. She set the phone down and placed her hands on the desk to steady herself as she rose to her feet. Her first step was heavy, burdened by exhaustion, but each step that followed grew more resolute. Gabriella approached the small mirror hanging on the wall, looking into her own reflection. Her pale face and swollen eyes stared back, but within them was a spark of faint but unyielding determination.
"This is the last chance,"
she whispered, her voice low but steady.
"I won't let them win."
She smoothed her hair back and ran a hand over her face, erasing the traces of her tears. The weariness on her face began to give way to a steely resolve. Gabriella was no longer the broken figure standing beneath the press conference lights. She was herself again, a fighter who had endured and overcome countless battles before. Turning back to the desk, she picked up her phone and typed a quick reply.
"Meet me at the usual place. We're doing this, Clara."
As the message sent, Gabriella walked to the window, her gaze fixed on the storm raging outside. The relentless downpour no longer sounded like a dirge of defeat, but a drumbeat for the battle ahead. This was no longer about defense, this was the time for action for retaliation. The abandoned warehouse loomed in the darkness like a massive, silent monolith, foreboding and unyielding. The few flickering neon lights hanging precariously from the ceiling cast weak, erratic glows that failed to dispel the shadows enveloping every corner. The wind howled through the cracks in the rusty metal doors, creating an eerie symphony of ghostly whispers that echoed through the cavernous space. Gabriella led the way, her footsteps echoing sharply against the cold concrete floor. Her eyes scanned the space ahead, sharp and vigilant, but the weight of pressure bore down heavily on her. In her hand, she gripped her phone tightly, the screen still displaying the final location. Clara had pinpointed this was where Ava was being held. Behind her, Clara moved cautiously, her eyes darting around the warehouse, as though ensuring they weren't being watched. Whenever the flickering lights illuminated her face, the tension etched into her features became unmistakable. Michael followed closely, his hands clenched into fists. He stopped every time a noise pierced the oppressive silence, the clinking of metal chains in some unseen corner, or the groaning creak of a door swaying in the wind. Though he tried to maintain a facade of composure, his eyes betrayed a worry that gnawed at his every thought. In the distance, the faint wail of a police siren echoed through the night, the sound drifting lazily through the empty streets beyond. No one spoke. Silence blanketed the group, broken only by the steady rhythm of their footsteps and their heavy, tense breathing, mingling with the unsettling sounds of the warehouse. Gabriella came to a halt in front of a massive door, her hand reaching out to touch the cold metal surface. Her palm was slick with sweat, but she refused to let herself falter. Turning back to face Clara and Michael, her eyes blazed with unshakable determination.
"We end this, here and now,"
she said, her voice low but resolute. Clara gave a quick nod, gripping the small tracking device in her hand as if bracing herself for the unknown. Michael stepped closer to Gabriella, his breathing measured but heavy.
"Let's go,"
he said, his voice steady and firm. The door groaned loudly as Gabriella pushed it open. A stale mix of mildew and oil filled the air, rushing out to assault their senses. The faint light from outside spilled weakly into the cavernous interior, illuminating only a sliver of the vast warehouse. Inside, shadows loomed large, shifting almost imperceptibly, like predators lying in wait. The abandoned warehouse stretched out in the dark, its cavernous interior illuminated by the weak, flickering glow of overhead lights. Gabriella's heels struck the cold concrete floor with deliberate weight, each step resonating like a declaration of unshakable resolve. The wavering light cast sharp shadows across her face, accentuating the fierce determination etched into her features. Ahead, a figure emerged from the shadows. David, his once impeccable suit now wrinkled and stained, stood like a phantom of authority. A wry smile curled his lips, and his cold, calculating eyes locked onto Gabriella.
"I knew you'd come,"
David said, his tone low and laced with derision.
"You never know when to quit, do you?"
Gabriella stopped a few feet from him, her head held high, her eyes blazing with defiance.
"You think I'd back down? You really don't know me at all?"
She replied, her voice steady, each word cutting through the stale air like a blade. David chuckled, the sound echoing through the vast space like ice breaking.
"Back down? No, Gabriella. But have you ever considered that this game doesn't end with you winning? You can stand there playing the unyielding hero, but right now..."
He reached into his pocket and withdrew his phone. A swipe of his finger revealed a grainy image of Ava, tied to a chair in a dimly lit room. Gabriella felt her chest tighten, her breath catching in her throat, but she quickly buried the panic threatening to surface.
"Right now, your daughter's time is running out,"
David said, his voice dropping into a sinister whisper, each word deliberate and cutting.
"Every mistake you make here will be paid for in her blood."
Gabriella clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms as she fought to maintain her composure. She couldn't let him see her fear.
"You don't understand, David?"
she said, her voice sharp and unwavering.
"Ava's life doesn't rest in your hands, and I'll make sure the whole world knows who you really are."
Elsewhere in the warehouse, Michael and his team moved stealthily under Clara's guidance. Her tracking device led them to a small room tucked away at the far end of the building, Ava's prison. Michael signaled for 2 team members to split off, carefully disabling the security cameras Clara had mapped out beforehand.
"Move fast. We don't have much time,"
Michael whispered, his voice tight with urgency as he maneuvered around rusting crates and broken pallets. Back at the center of the warehouse, David smirked and took a step closer to Gabriella.
"Do you know something, Gabriella?"
he drawled, his tone mockingly conversational.
"I offered you an easy way out. All you had to do was admit guilt, sign the deal, and this would have been over. But no, you had to make things complicated."
Gabriella inhaled deeply, keeping her focus locked on him.
"You wanted to destroy me to protect your interests, but you'll never destroy what I stand for."
David sneered, his eyes glinting with malice.
"What you stand for? That's a good one. Everyone has turned their back on you, Gabriella. Even if you win here tonight, you'll still be a failure in the eyes of the world."
In the back room, Michael and his team reached their target. One of his colleagues swiftly unlocked the door with a tool Clara had provided. The door creaked open, revealing Ava bound to a chair, her small figure illuminated by the faint hallway light.
"Ava, it's me, it's Dad."
Michael's voice cracked as he rushed forward, his heart pounding in his chest. The little girl looked up, her tear-streaked face lighting up with recognition and relief.
"Daddy."
Ava whispered weakly. Michael's hands worked quickly to untie the ropes, his movements frantic but precise. He scooped her up into his arms, holding her tightly.
"You're safe now, Ava. I'm here. Nothing can hurt you anymore."
Back in the warehouse's main space, Gabriella continued to face off with David, her eyes burning with resolve. She knew Ava was safe now, and it was time to end this once and for all.
"You're right, David."
Gabriella said, stepping closer. Her voice was calm, but the intensity behind it was undeniable.
"I thought I'd lost everything, but there's one thing you'll never understand. I don't fight for my reputation. I fight for the truth, and the truth will destroy everything you've built."
The darkness of the warehouse was shattered as Clara stepped out from the shadows, the faint flicker of overhead lights casting a determined glow on her face. In her hand was a small USB drive, its tiny green light pulsing like a beacon of the truth, finally uncovered.
"We've gathered enough evidence to expose everything you've done,"
Clara announced, her voice clear and resolute, cutting through the tension in the air. David spun around, his cold, calculating eyes flicking from Clara to the USB in her hand. A smirk tugged at his lips, an attempt to mask the flicker of unease in his gaze.
"Evidence?"
David sneered, his voice dripping with mockery.
"You think a little USB can bring me down? Gabriella, do you really think this changes anything?"
Gabriella stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with Clara. Her eyes burned with steely determination, no trace of fear or despair remaining.
"David, you haven't just lost to me today?"
Gabriella said, her voice ringing with authority, each word landing like a hammer blow.
"You've lost to yourself. You've sacrificed everything to protect something that was never yours to begin with."
David's smirk faltered, his brow furrowing as the weight of her words sank in. He glanced around the room, his eyes darting for an escape route. Clara caught the movement, her own eyes narrowing.
"There's no escape, David,"
Clara said, stepping forward.
"We've already sent copies of this evidence to the authorities. You've been under surveillance this entire time, and the police are on their way."
As if on cue, the distant wail of sirens pierced the air, growing louder with each passing second, a relentless drumbeat of impending justice. David turned back sharply, his composure cracking as he saw Gabriella and Clara standing firm, unshaken.
"No?"
David roared, lunging toward Clara in a desperate attempt to seize the USB. Gabriella moved swiftly, stepping in front of Clara, her gaze unwavering.
"Enough, David,"
she said, her voice low and commanding.
"You have nothing left. Stop before you destroy yourself even further."
David hesitated, his body frozen for a brief moment, but the animalistic instinct to flee took over. He turned on his heel and bolted toward the rear exit of the warehouse.
"Don't let him get away,"
Clara shouted. From the other side of the room, Michael appeared, a communication device in his hand. He signaled, and within moments, a team of police officers stormed through the main and rear entrances, flashlights piercing through the dim space. Their beams locked onto David, forcing him to halt mid-run.
"David Hamilton, you are under arrest for charges of embezzlement, extortion, and endangering lives,"
an officer declared, stepping forward to cuff him. David thrashed against their grip, his face twisting with fury and fear.
"You can't do this to me. I have power. You'll regret this,"
he bellowed, but his words fell on deaf ears as the officers hauled him away. Clara stepped closer, her gaze fixed on David as he was led out.
"You can cling to your illusion of power, David,"
she said, her voice steady and cutting.
"But the truth will dismantle everything you've built."
Gabriella stood motionless, her eyes following David until he disappeared from view behind the cluster of officers. A wave of relief surged through her chest, a weight she had carried for so long finally beginning to lift. Clara turned back, her eyes alight with determination. Holding up the USB, a small but triumphant smile graced her lips.
We didn't just get Ava back, Gabriella. We reclaimed the truth.
Gabriella nodded slowly, her eyes softening for the first time in days. A glimmer of hope, fragile but real, flickered in her expression. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe they had won. Gabriella burst into the small room where Ava had been rescued, her feet barely touching the ground. As the door swung open, her eyes immediately locked onto Avia, sitting in an old, battered chair. Michael had already freed her from the restraints, but the little girl still looked dazed. The dim light from the hanging bulb overhead cast a faint glow on Ava's tangled hair, making it shimmer like a fragile flame in the darkness.
Ava!
Gabriella called out, her voice cracking with emotion. Ava lifted her head, her red, swollen eyes reflecting hours of fear and despair. But the moment she saw her mother, her eyes lit up, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Without hesitation, Ava leapt from the chair and ran straight into Gabriella's waiting arms.
Mommy!
Ava sobbed, her small arms wrapping tightly around Gabriella, as if letting go would make her mother disappear. Gabriella sank to her knees, pulling Ava close, her arms encircling her daughter as though shielding her from the entire world. She gently brushed Ava's hair away from her face, her own tears falling freely as she felt the child's trembling body against her. But these tears were different. Now they were tears of relief, of overwhelming gratitude.
I knew you'd come for me.
Ava whispered through her sobs, her tiny voice carrying an unshakable trust. Gabriella laughed softly through her own tears, her shoulders shaking as she held Ava even tighter.
I will never leave you, sweetheart,
Gabriella said, her voice trembling but resolute.
Never, you're my everything.
Michael stood nearby, his eyes brimming with both joy and relief as he watched his wife and daughter cling to each other. It felt as though the entire world had been returned to him in that single moment. He reached out, his hand gently resting on Ava's back, rubbing in soothing circles to assure her that the nightmare was over. At the doorway, Clara stood silently, watching the reunion unfold. She didn't step inside, content to observe from the shadows. Her face softened, and her eyes glistened with quiet satisfaction. A small, knowing smile played on her lips, a silent acknowledgement that her part in this fight had been worth every effort. The dim light from the hallway fell across her face, casting her as the quiet guardian who had worked tirelessly behind the scenes to make this moment possible. Ava looked up from Gabriella's arms, her tear-streaked face now brightened by a soft smile.
Mommy, can we go home now?
Gabriella nodded, her hand gently caressing Ava's cheek.
Yes, sweetheart, we're going home. Back to where you belong, where you'll always be safe.
The three of them, Gabriella, Michael, and Ava, stood together, their pain and fear melting away in the warmth of their reunion. For a moment, the horrors of the past days faded, replaced by the undeniable strength of their bond. Clara turned quietly, stepping away without a word, leaving the family to their moment. Her expression was calm, her purpose fulfilled. The distant glow of police lights still flickered outside, a stark reminder of the ordeal they had just endured. But for Gabriella, Michael, and Ava, the darkness no longer felt so insurmountable. Their night was finally giving way to the dawn of something new, something hopeful. The stage was bathed in radiant light, with spotlights casting an aura of both grandeur and warmth. Hundreds of spectators filled the auditorium, their applause roaring like thunder as Gabriella stepped out from the wings. She wore a simple yet elegant dress, her hair cascading naturally over her shoulders. Her face bore no trace of the pain she had endured, only a calm resolve and unwavering determination. Below her, the crowd rose to their feet, and some couldn't hold back their emotions, shouting,
Gabriella! Gabriella!
Those who had once criticized her were now the first to stand, their voices ringing with newfound support. A sense of renewal swept through the room, like a wave carrying everyone in its path. Gabriella approached the microphone at the center of the stage, the lights converging on her to emphasize her confident and resolute presence. She stood tall, taking a deep breath, her gaze sweeping over the audience, each face, each pair of eyes focused on her with trust and admiration.
Today I stand before you not for fame, but for the truth.
Gabriella began, her voice clear and strong, reverberating through the hall.
We have proven that truth and courage can overcome even the darkest forces.
Applause erupted once more, louder this time, lasting longer. Gabriella raised a hand gently, signaling for quiet. As the noise subsided, she continued, her voice rich with emotion.
In recent days, I faced my greatest fears and learned that unity, faith in justice, and the courage to fight can create miracles. This is not just my victory. It is a victory for all of us who believe that truth can never be silenced.
Tears glistened in the eyes of some audience members, their emotions too overwhelming to contain. Others clasped hands, inspired by the strength radiating from Gabriella's words. She paused for a moment, her gaze shifting to the cameras, as if addressing the entire world.
No matter how difficult the road ahead may seem, we must never give up. Because truth always finds its way to the light, and courage is what will guide us to a better tomorrow.
The applause erupted again, a tidal wave of sound that filled every corner of the auditorium. Gabriella smiled, a gentle yet profound smile that spoke volumes. She bowed to the audience, her eyes shining with gratitude and hope. As she stepped off the stage, the spotlight followed her, casting a luminous path that seemed to herald the beginning of a new chapter in her life. Gabriella paused at the exit, turning to take one last look at the stage. Her steadfast smile lingered, a silent promise to herself and to those who had placed their faith in her. From this moment forward, Gabriella was no longer merely a woman who had endured hardship. She was a symbol of resilience, of unyielding strength, and of the belief that anyone can rise from the ashes.
Thank you for joining Gabriella on this emotional journey. Don't forget to explore more videos on the channel for thrilling, inspiring stories like this one.